Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the top 10 troops to trait first. This has been requested to make an updated version of this by quite a few people, and since consoles just recently got the 2.2 patch, which made all of their troop balance pretty much the same to PC and mobile, I figured it would be the perfect time to do so. These troops I'm going to be showing in this top 10 are only common, rares, and ultra rares, as those are the only rarities that are really viable to trait when you are first starting out. Other thing to note about this is you by no means need to trait every single one of these troops. These are just suggestions as far as things that you can build around when you initially trait them starting out. You by no means need to trait all of these. It wouldn't even be viable to trait all of these. Just pick a few of them that you really like and go from there. So let's start with number 10 is of course the Goblin. You start off with this Goblin and it does some pretty good things. It'll help you with a little bit of extra gold, but that's not why you get it. The main reason is the nature link. Goblin teams, or all Goblin teams, using a team of Goblins and 3 other different troops that are also of Goblin type, is a very solid team to be using when you're first starting out. And since Goblin is one of the first troops you get, it's the 3rd troop you get in the first initial 3, it is a really good idea to level and trade it first, as it'll help you progress through early game before you get any of your bulks of cards. So it is definitely a good idea to start trading him up. Next, on number 9, they both are very similar, so I put them both on the same one, is Miststalker and Spirit Fox. Both of them are a true damage cast with a stealthy on top of them. Stealthy is pretty good for keeping the troop alive, especially if they are at a lower level because they can't specifically be targeted. As far as Miststalker, Miststalker has one of the highest possible damages you can really have early on in the game because it completely ignores all armor with the true damage. It can set poison on them, and it even gains additional magic if it gets the kill. You can either get it up to 1 trait, 2 traits, or 3 traits. It's one that's very versatile in that regardless of how many traits you get it on it, it'll be really good. The magic link, it will help it get its ability up a lot quicker. You'll be able to get it in 2 to 3 turns instead of what would normally be about 4 turns. Stealthy will make sure it can't be targeted by targeted spells, and if you get Fire Spirit, that will just add even more true damage to it. As far as Spirit Fox, it has a little bit lower of a damage, but it does have a 2-to-1 ratio, which is pretty good early on in the game, and it also has a 7 mana drain, which with it's fully traded, if you happen to be able to get it that far, will allow you to be able to have a drain from the very first turn, which is the only troop in the entire game that can do that right now, draining on the very first turn. So pretty useful in that regard, and of course it has the stealthy to make sure if it is a lower level that it won't be hit as easily. So on to number 8 is the Direwolf. One of the best first lots you can really have when you are early on in the game. You can either do the Goblin or you can go for your Direwolf. Direwolf can place Entangle, places Hunter's Mark. It'll make sure that their skulls won't really be able to do anything while yours will do a lot, does some damage on top of that, and if you have a bunch of green on the board, maybe if you're using it with a Dryad or if you happen to have a Green Seer, you'll be able to get extra turns on it as well. As far as traits, the main 2 you'd want to go for is either up to Entrapment or all the way to Agile. Entrapment will make sure that it can synergize with the Entangle it has to be able to do twice as much damage, which is technically 4 times as much damage, because Hunter's Mark's effect for its duration is your skull damage will do twice as much, and stacking that with Entrapment will make his skull damage do 4 times as much damage. And he has Agile, which isn't the best of traits, but it can have a 20% chance to completely negate any skull instance that the enemy may do. And this is even to dodge skull spam, which is pretty active right now, especially on consoles, since you guys won't be getting the Bone Dragon nerf as recently. It'll probably be like a couple months from now until you guys will be getting it, but Agile is the best thing in the game for being able to dodge skull spam, so do keep that in mind, and that's applicable to any troop that happens to have the Agile trait. Next up is Manticore, arguably the best troop in the game that has Impervious. It also has it in its 2nd slot and is only an ultra rare, so you can get it fairly easily. It has a stun and drain on its ability, same exact drain as a Spirit Fox. The only difference is it does not have Empowered. It used to, but on both the console and every version of the game, it now has the Fast trait, which will only start it with 4 mana, so you really don't even need to get it fully traded. You can if you want, but but the main trait you need on him is Impervious for how solid of a impervious troop he is compared to other options in the game, at least early on. Most optimal would be a Behemoth, but that is a legendary and would take forever to trait. Speaking of blue-brown traitstones with the Behemoth, a really good option if you want to start trading like almost as like your very first troop is a Warlock. Necromancy is insanely good, and as far as every single easy to obtain necromancy in Gems of War, this is just the most useful troop. He does damage to an enemy, has a nice 2-to-1 boost ratio, can remove some gems from the board, gains even more damage if you get his second trait, but the main thing you need from him is his very first trait. 50% extra souls every single battle that you do. If you end up getting max souls, it'll help out quite a bit because it raises the cap that you can get for the turn or for the game too. Normally it's only 40, but you put one of these at 60, then it's 80, then it's 100, and you can gain quite a bit of souls to be able to level up all of your troops. I mentioned white with this too because white is personally my favorite thing for gaining souls early on in the game if you don't have any other options. Some other ones are Warlock and Valkyrie as well, but as far as the biggest powerhouse between them, I tend to prefer white, mainly because you can put it with other true damage, you can put it with the Miststalker that I mentioned earlier, and Spirit Fox, and there's a lot of different early game options that you can start to use it within. And it has a life steal, which means it does true damage to them, plus it gains that much life. It'll always create 5 purples, and it gains souls based on its magic as well. Both the life steal and the soul gain is based on magic. You would definitely want to get it to, at minimum, to the very first trait, which is the Water Link, which will help get his ability up quicker. And if you can, you'd want to go all the way up to Fire Spirit. This, of course, will give him even more souls, more life steal, and pretty much more everything other than gem spawn. So very useful in that regard. Up to number 5, we have Goblin Rocket, one of my personal favorite board controls in the entire game. Another one that I could probably put here too is a Soothsayer, both of which have a really good board control spell. One pretty good benefit with the Goblin Rocket though is he does utilize pretty much every single trait he has, particularly Fire Link and Flame. Fire Link in particular you definitely want to get on him. This will allow him to get his ability up quicker, and on how big of a board control spell he has, that is really important. He explodes a gem, which means you get 70% of all of that mana. It then deals damage to a random enemy, a little bit of split damage in there too to adjacent enemies, and the most important part about this is it gains an extra turn, so you can just do a 3x3 explosion on the board, set something up, go and use your turn to take like a 4 times to 5 times or something like that, and gain a lot of mana. There's a lot of purposes that you can do with a Goblin Rocket, and having that extra Fire Link on it will help to be able to get his mana up just that much quicker. And if you happen to be using an all-Goblin team, like with the Goblin mentioned earlier and a few others, you could put him in second slot, ideally, and once your first slot dies, you'll have that nice burning effect, which will do 3 damage every single turn until the burning wears off. For number 4, we have the Lava Elemental. Speaking of burning, here we go. It explodes your gems, deals a huge amount of damage, and based on reds destroyed, at a 3 times ratio, so every single red he destroys is an additional 3 damage. And one really important thing about this is it burns, which of course, as I just mentioned, does 3 damage per turn. As far as traits, it has that nice fireproof, so you don't need to worry about all those annoying burns early on in the game, but that's normally why you don't want him, or that's not the biggest part about him. The main thing is Pyromania and Stone Skin. Pyromania, twice as much skull damage for him whenever he hits a thing that's on fire, and well, he can burn them, so he'll pretty much always be doing 2 times skull damage. And on top of that, he can have half reduction to all skulls with Stone Skin. Absolutely any troop that you can find with Stone Skin is pretty much worth it early on in the game. This is one of them. I'll be showing another one a little bit later as we go down this list. But Lava Elemental, as far as single target Stone Skins, is the strongest single target in the entire game right now, with a few exceptions of like some legendaries and stuff. But as far as like easy to obtain things, he has some really high single damage, and early on in the game his ability will most likely be able to one-shot in most instances, and if his ability don't, his skull definitely will. So, next up on number 3, we have a 3-way tie between Giant Spider, Alchemist, and Valkyrie. The reason for this is all 3 of them, out of every single, well, there's 2 aspects of this. Every single one of these can convert a select gem to a specific color. Giant Spider does it to purple, Alchemist does it to yellow, and Valkyrie does it to blue. One other really good thing is out of every single one of the 7 troops that can convert to a specific color, all 3 of these have a link on them. Giant Spider has Magic Link, Alchemist has Fire Link on 2nd trait, and Valkyrie has Water Link on 3rd trait. You would want to stop trading these at every single one of these. So Giant Spider, you only need 1 traits on, Alchemist, you only need 2, and Valkyrie, you would want to get fully traded. But all 3 of these are very, very, very versatile. You can use any of these 3 in pretty much any team to be able to feed the mana. If you need something, if you're using a strong purple, you just use a Giant Spider. If you're using something that needs a lot of yellow, you just use an Alchemist. And if you need something that needs a lot of blues, you just use a Valkyrie. One pretty good thing about all of these 2 is that they all have a secondary effect on them. Giant Spider can make a little spider swarm, which will help you tank if you don't have like stone skin on anything, or you just don't, or just need a little bit more tankiness for skull spam or something. Alchemist will give you a little bit more gold, and the most commonly used one is Valkyrie because it gives souls, which will help you trade up all of your troops. So, next up, number 2, Knight Coronet, an excessively popular pick because he uses literally every trait of his, similar to that of a Miststalker. He deals damage to the first and last enemy. One pretty good thing about this in early game is a lot of people don't tend to put a good back tank in their game, in their team. They may just put like a weak level 5 or something there that doesn't have much HP, and Knight Coronet can easily destroy that. And it has a 2-to-1 boost ratio, not too bad for every single 2 purples that it removes, additional damage on top of it, but its traits is what makes it absolutely insane. First trait gains 3 to all stats, that's attack, HP, armor, and its magic, which is technically 6 extra damage because it hits 2 different troops every single time. It then has Water Spirit, which gives even more damage on top of that. That's at minimum 1 additional magic because it is indeed a blue, and depending on your team, you could have 3 to 4 additional magic, and of course, it is twice as effective as that since it hits multiple troops too, the first and the last troop. And on top of that, it has the very vital stone skin that I mentioned earlier, excessively good, negates all skulls by 50% damage. It's not like an Agile where it can completely dodge it, but it will mitigate it quite a bit, and it will be much better than that of an Agile. So, what is the absolute best thing to trait early on in the game? Well, of course, all of these are opinionated onto my own, but I'm pretty sure quite a few people out there would agree with me, particularly some late game players who have to see this quite a bit as of recently, due to Bone Dragon and stuff. And that troop is the Wraith. Yes, Wraith. Its ability is true damage. Of course, true damage is always really nice in early game. It'll either steal 9 life from them, which means he'll gain 9 HP and deal 9 true damage to them, or it'll steal all of their mana, and this is steal as in he takes it. So if they have 7 or more mana, he'll drain all of it, and then he'll be right at full mana. Or if they have 5, he'll drain the 5, and then he'll be at 5 out of 7. And very potent ability for a common. This is a common too. This is a common troop, which means it's excessively easy to trade up as well. And what really makes it absolutely devastating is it is the easiest troop in the entire game to obtain Death Touch, which places Death Mark whenever this troop does skull damage. It does have to do at least 1 damage. If it's Entangle and you get a critical, it'll still trigger, but if you end up taking a skull and you do 0 skull damage, either from your attack being reduced to 0 or from being Entangle, it'll unfortunately not trigger, but you normally don't have to worry about that too much, and if it is something like that, you can always just cleanse or have an attack buff on your team. But what does Death Touch does? It places Death Mark. What does Death Mark do? It has a 10% chance every single turn that will just instantly kill the troop that is Death Marked, and this starts triggering from the instance that is on. So even if you just place the Death Mark from that turn transition from it taking the skull to the AI being able to take its turn, there's a 10% chance right there that it'll die, and every subsequent turn is still that full 10% chance. Like all status effects in this game though, it does cumulatively have a chance to cleanse off. The first turn has a 10% chance to cleanse off, then 20, then 30, then 40, then 50, all the way until it actually cleanses. But it has a pretty good chance that it will die before then. It is really commonly used. It is a common, so you can get it up super quick. You can see I have it up to Death Touch Chilling Touch would only use 1 Arcane if you want to get that, and that would replace Freeze on them as well. Both of these are pretty much the 2 best stats effects in the entire game as of this current moment. So he's basically utilizing every single one of the strongest ones off of his skull damage. Chilling Touch, whenever a troop is frozen, it'll just prevent them from being able to get extra turns on skulls, since it'll be the first troop. It'll also prevent the enemy from getting extra turns on any of those colors. So if you were to freeze like red-blue, it would freeze them on red whenever they try to take an extra turn on red, blue, or skull, since he can only hit the first troop, so they won't be able to use skulls for the first troop. So that is the full list of troops that you can trait early on in the game. Of course, as mentioned earlier, don't even try trading all of these. You have no purpose to have absolutely all of these traded, but having a select few, maybe going with like a true damage build or something around the Valkyrie or something around any of those mentioned in the 3 panel or something like that, would be a pretty good idea. But this is just to give you a standard footing of some of the troops that are pretty good to trait early on in the game. I will eventually do a comprehensive list of like every single troop that is and is not worth trading, but I figured I'd just make this nice little pretty easy to understand list for now, just to give you guys a general idea of what you should be aiming for when you're first starting out with trading stuff in Gems of War. Anyways, that'll wrap it up for this video. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Hope this was helpful. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.